All right, hello everyone. This is Faith Lutheran School, Unit 5. Thanks team for coming on out on a Saturday. We're so excited to hear what you have to say. My name is Mark McCall. I'm your facilitator for today and your timekeeper. We'll allow the judges to introduce themselves in just a moment, and then they'll let you introduce yourselves. Just as a quick reminder that you have 4 minutes for your prepared speech and 8 minutes of questions for follow-up from the judges, and then they'll provide feedback for you afterward. And to help you out a little bit with timing, I'm going to do a virtual background when we get to your time. So with 1 minute remaining, I'll go to green. And then when your time is up after your 4 and your 8 minutes, I'll switch to yellow. So you'll see that pretty clearly. And with that, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to the judges.
Well, welcome to this afternoon and congratulations to both you and your teachers and coaches. We're so glad that you were able to accomplish this in this most difficult year. My name is Rebecca Tinder. I'm a retired attorney from Charleston, West Virginia, and the West Virginia We the People coordinator. Lindsay?
I'm Lindsay Draper. I'm retired from the juvenile court bench here in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin.
My name is Candida Steele, and I'm retired from the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I handled federal government contract disputes around the country, and I've been with the program for 20 years, so I'm thrilled to see you all.
Students?
Hi, I'm Emily Tan.
I'm Dagny Bischoff.
I'm Nicholas Fitzgerald.
And we go to Faith Lutheran Middle School and High School. Our coach is Ms. Carol. Thank you for taking your time off today to listen to us present Unit 5.
Terrific. We're going to do question 1, which says, when a choice must be made, it is better to allow those who preach racial hate rather than to be panicked into embarking on a dangerous course of permitting the government to decide what its citizens may say and hear. Do you agree or disagree with Judge Bernard Decker's upholding the rights of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois? Why? What limits has the U.S. Supreme Court placed on freedom of expression? What benefit, if any, is there from the presentation of ideas that are designed to alarm, antagonize, and offend members of society? What limits of freedom of expression, if any, should be placed on social media sites? You may begin.
If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. We agree with this quote from George Orwell, especially in the case of Colin v. Smith. We believe that as long as there is no violence involved, all people have the right to express themselves. Lately, the government has also been allowing private stores and social media sites to infringe on people's freedom of expression. For example, Mike Linow had his company canceled by over 20 retailers due to much debate about the 2020 election. For these reasons, we only see private companies as limiting us on our First Amendment right. But the government actually puts limits on our freedom of expression too. The government limits us in ways that stop us from going beyond the lines of obvious morals. These include limits on pornography, sedition, obscenity, and many others which are all written under the First Amendment. These limits are very constitutional. There are also moments when the government tries to limit the freedom of expression that turns out to be unconstitutional. For example, in the Johnson v. Texas case in 1984, Texas tried to control their citizens' freedom of expression through an unconstitutional law previously passed. The Supreme Court ruled that Johnson did have the right to burn the flag, for he was rightfully expressing himself without harming anybody. Although our freedoms have limits to stop us from hurting or harming others, there are some benefits to speaking our mind, even if it may be designed to offend others.
Additionally, when freedom of expression involves the presentation of hate speech, we believe that it should be secured and protected. Noam Chomsky, an American linguist, once said, "If we don't believe in freedom of expression for the people we despise, we don't believe in it at all." Hate speech, like many other rights, comes with benefits. The protection of hate speech allows those who suppose it is necessary to publicly state their opinions and beliefs, thereby exposing prejudices that might otherwise be suppressed by society's evaluations. In the Snyder versus Phelps case of 2010, the Supreme Court decided that speech deals with matters of public concern when it can be fairly considered as relating to any matter of political, social, or other concern to the community, or when it is a subject of general interest, into value, and concern to the public. According to this case, even courts help ensure how the First Amendment requires the government to strictly defend and secure robust debate on matters of public concern, even when said debate evolves into distasteful, offensive, or verbal conflict that that causes others to feel with emotions of distress, anger, or vexation. Under current First Amendment jurisprudence, hate speech is only allowed to be criminalized when it clearly incites criminal activity or consists of specific threats of violence targeted at a certain group.
The same concept of criminalized hate speeches can be applied to social media today. These platforms are privately owned entities and should be able to censor content on their websites that they don't see followed the terms of service guidelines. The Communications Decency Act is an example of Congress enacting upon social media by regulating pornographic material. We personally believe that there shouldn't be too many limitations regarding social media. However, it is significant that the media should be a safe place. Examples of limits would include speeches that possibly interfere with others' rights and threats of lawless actions. Platforms such as Facebook and Twitter either ban or limit speeches considered repulsive. For example, in the court case Alonis versus United States, he had threatened his ex-wife, ex-boss, and a kindergarten class and planting his ban on Facebook. The courts claim that although he does have his right of free speech, threats are not protected under the First Amendment. Additionally, social media platforms often ban or restrict hate speeches, misinformation, obscenity, and threats. For example, in January 2021, Twitter had banned the accounts of Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, and others who promoted the QAnon conspiracy theory, which multiple news media claimed it to be a factual inaccuracy. Many people say that the social media company enacts on its own bias, as others claim that it violated their policies. Although practicing free speech is significant to our democracy to voice our opinions, we believe that a few limitations and inhibited censorship on social media are necessary for the safety of our communities to reduce the risk of menace. We are now ready for our questions.
You mentioned factual inaccuracies. Should those be protected by the First Amendment? Why or why not?
I believe factual inaccuracies should be protected under the First Amendment. For example, in the court case New York Times Company versus Solvian, New York Times had published an article that contained factual inaccuracies regarding police officials in the civil rights movement. Solvian was offended by this and had sued the company. The courts later ruled that factual inaccuracies are protected under the First Amendment. In fact, government prefers factual inaccuracies rather disregarding their freedom of speech.
Do you agree or disagree with that view?
I completely agree with their view and their ruling because factual inaccuracies aren't really effective towards others unless it contains threats or imminent lawless actions.
But
In your statement, you made reference to the My Pillow guy and the fact that Lindell has lost a lot of business. Shouldn't that really be the way that we respond to speech that we don't like, to allow the marketplace, to allow people to respond by doing business or not, rather than having governmental entities interfere?
Can you restate the question, please?
Shouldn't we let people from the private sector, either folks who might buy the pillow or stores that might stock the pillows, shouldn't that be the way that we do things rather than have people decide this is unpopular speech or you're giving misinformation, so we're not going to deal with you anymore? How do we control misinformation, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Best way.
is there a difference between inaccuracies and misinformation?
I believe that there is a difference between inaccuracies and misinformation, but to deal with misinformation, to deal with beasts that we don't like, I think private companies do have the right to stop people like the My Pillow guy from selling their product in their store. Do I believe that it is morally right to stop someone from doing that just because of their beliefs? No, but I do believe that private companies have the right to basically, I believe that that the private companies aren't taking away the My Pillow guy's freedom of speech as much as they are just taking away his product. He still has the freedom to say what he wants and the freedom to his opinions. So I believe that the private companies do have the right to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, okay. So do you think that there should be limits on students' free speech expression? And do you think maybe that should be tied to the age of the students that at issue?
I don't believe students should have a limit other than the ones society gives to us. For an example, in the court case Hazelwood School District versus Coolmere, Coolmere had a school news report in which they claimed many inappropriate, and they talked about many inappropriate things, and the school district had suspended them. Obviously, the court had ruled for Coolmere because they had their freedom of speech. And I think they should have obvious morals of what they should and shouldn't post. There are limits to freedom of expression that can apply to students today. For example, misinformation, obscenity, and threats.
I would have to agree with my colleague. Another example would be the case of Barnett versus West Virginia State Board of Education, in which the Barnett children refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance during school, which ended up leading to them getting suspended. The Supreme Court did rule on Barnett's side that they had the right to not say the freedom of speech, not say the Pledge of Allegiance, even though they are American citizens. And I believe that sets a good baseline for what we can do and say in school. I think we should have the same rights in school as we would have in public and on the streets. And we should have the right to say what we want without being violent or inciting violence.
Okay.
Does freedom of expression contribute to good government? And explain your answer.
Yes, I believe freedom of expression does contribute to good government. For example, Section 12 of the Virginia Declaration of Rights Act states that freedom of expression is one of the greatest bulwarks of liberty and can never be restrained under the government. Since without freedom of expression, there is no liberty, and without liberty, there is no freedom of expression. The government, one of its main protections is of liberty, and freedom of expression, it also can benefit our citizenship too, because government is mainly ruled by popular sovereignty, which is where people can decide what the government can and cannot do.
Should a school have the right to punish a student based on a Facebook post made after school that talked badly about a teacher? I'm not trying to get you in trouble.
Do you have an opinion?
Is that free speech?
Sorry, I personally believe that the school does not have the right to limit somebody's freedom of speech or expression, especially when it's a student that has published a post on Facebook where they insult the teacher, perhaps.
I personally believe that it depends on what they had posted. If it consisted of, say, a threat or posting the teacher's private information that the teacher didn't consent to, then I believe the school should have a say in it.
I would have to agree with here because I would say that is free speech. When you are saying something out of school, I believe that you have the right to say what you want. It's actually, for me, it's similar to the Barnett versus West Virginia State Board of Education case, because although you are like a citizen of that school, you still have the right to voice your opinions on what you want that school to be like, and if you don't like the school or you do like the school.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. So can you define hate speech? I know you talked about it a bit and talked about when it should be criminalized. When do you think that would happen?
Hate speech is something that verbally attacks a specific group of people. For example, in Brandenburg versus Ohio, Brandenburg had presented a hate speech regarding Jewish and other race, and he said many racist and rude comments. The courts ruled that Brandenburg did have the right to do that.
Thank you. Well done, students, and you and your teachers should be commended for all of your hard work. It really shows. That's terrific. I enjoyed your prepared remarks. You went through review of all of the issues and hit Snyder versus Phelps and Lyon versus US and a whole bunch of cases, and led us into a great discussion about the issues. Then when we were asking you questions, you were able to also pull in court cases like the New York Times case and the Lindell pillow guy, and were able to, and the Pledge of Allegiance, the Barnett versus West Virginia Board of Education, which I particularly appreciated. And think you applied them in a way that showed us that you understood not only what the case was, but that it was applicable in answering the question. And I think that shows a great understanding. And I appreciate all of the hard work that you did, and applaud you all.
I too appreciated, first of all, the case citations that you made. You talked about the cases that I kind of wanted to hear. You brought in some others that I hadn't thought about in terms of, yes, they need to be here. I just want to tell you, part of why I asked you that last question about your thoughts on Facebook and the post is because I actually was curious about how you felt about that, because I know I've got my own struggles and pulls on this one. And the way you had presented the earlier part of the conversation, I said, ask them, because I really respected your opinion. So that was, to me, kind of an indication you had touched on the important things, and it wasn't going to be a judging. I really wanted to know what you had to say. And so I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with me. You all were just a joy to listen to. Thank you. And congratulations.
I fully agree. I especially appreciated your references to Mr. Chomsky, and factual inaccuracies was a really nice way for us to get into the discussion of misinformation as well as inaccuracies. And it was you did a nice job of making a distinction between the two. I also really liked your depending on whether or not the student on Facebook is issuing a threat or revealing private information as opposed to just expressing an opinion. So I thought that was you understood the subtleties of for and against very well, and I appreciated everything you had to say. And I hope you've really had fun doing this, because we need you to continue to share with your colleagues and your friends about how important it is to go out and vote, and your families. And I'm sure you're going to be good voters all the rest of your lives. But I hope you also might consider representing the rest of us in local or state or federal government, or being lawyers or judges, because we need people who understand the Constitution to be representing us in our government in some fashion or another. So congratulations. I'll sleep much easier at night knowing that you all have learned what you have and will carry us forward. Thank you. You did a great job.
Right. Thank you, team.